Some life shifts do not tap you on the shoulder. They take the floor out from under you. For Stephen, that moment came in August 2020 when a weekend trip turned into a phone call that no parent should ever receive. His son Jake was gone. In this conversation, Stephen shares what grief does to your mind, your body, and your sense of safety in the world. We talk about anger and forgiveness and about that strange guilt that can show up the first time that you laugh again. And we talk about what it means to keep walking when part of you did not survive the day that your life changed. This is a story about unimaginable loss and the long, tender work of learning how to live again.
It was a doctor who introduced himself from Rhode Island. And then he paused, and then he said, I'm sorry, but I just pronounced your son dead. And everything pretty much went black. I was flying down the highway, so I just remember knowing, I don't know how, but I knew I had to get off the highway.
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Matt. How are you? Nice to be here.
Well, I'm doing well. Thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast.
Definitely.
So before we get into your story, which I know is another hard story and something that unfortunately a lot of other people will have experienced in some way, I'd love for you to tell us who you are in 2026. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days? Like, who is Stephen?
Yeah, so I'm a husband, a father, and a speaker, an author, and very much a changed person from who I was 5.5 years ago. As you alluded to, I mean, my life blew up, and just about everything changed, and it set me on a course that I obviously never had planned for. Never in my wildest imagination did I think a nightmare like this would unfold. There's no playbook for it. There's no planning. Like I said, it's pure survival. And I'm walking on and still standing.
Yeah. Well, and I commend you, and people will hear your story in just a minute. I think it is one that you're right. No one could ever, it's not something we even imagine or worry about, because it just seems like not, it's just not something that comes across our minds, thankfully. But you faced it, and now you're moving through it and moving with it, and you're never forgetting it. But it's something that will shape the newer version of you. Probably every day you're probably learning new things about yourself, especially as a speaker and as an author. Do you find that either of those experiences as a speaker or an author has helped you move through this?
Most definitely.
Okay.
I started to write because I needed to offload a lot of feelings I was storing that wasn't healthy. And I certainly didn't need to take it out on anyone. I needed just to puke it up, if you will. And so I started writing initially just to do that. It was not making any sense, but I was getting feelings out, and anger, rage, you name it. And then public speaking was never in the cards. My background has been as a sports marketing agent, executive. And so I've always been in the background, and my clients were the ones on camera and in the spotlight, and I would orchestrate it from behind the curtain. So it wasn't something I was ever really comfortable with. So I thought, but we, in the wake of losing my son, my family created a scholarship, and it's now turned into 3 scholarships. And when I went to award the first one, a year and almost 2 months from when Jake died, I got up to speak to a group of college football players and coaches and award the scholarship. And after doing that, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, I walked away from it emotionally gutted, but I also had this greater sense, if you will, like there was a calling, like this is what I'm supposed to do, because I really felt my son in that moment. He was probably holding me up, and I guess just kind of unfolded organically. You know, it wasn't like I lost my kid and I sat down and made a list of, hey, these are my priorities. It was just kind of like being a zombie for a year and figuring out how to put one foot in front of the next, how to wake up, how to find joy again, how not to feel guilt and shame when you laugh, or guilt for what happened even though I wasn't even there. But as a father, you kind of take on that role, like, oh, my son died and I was supposed to protect him. And so there's just a lot to deal with. And it's every day, like you said. I think, to me, it's a life sentence. 5.5 years out, and still have to deal with things that most people don't even contemplate, like small things, right? And to them, but to us, they're big. And
none of us are taught how to grieve either. So it's
oh
like,
no,
and not
we're
that there
taught
is
the
one
opposite.
way, right? Yeah, well, yeah. Especially as a guy too, you're probably taught, or you assumed, that we need to push down certain emotions growing up, and you're allowed to have these certain ones but not the other ones. And so with that also comes a lot of guilt and shame, because then you're shaming yourself as well through the journey.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I talk about it when I, especially when I talk to young students about how my father used to always tell me, "You get knocked down in life, get back up again right away." And I heard that a million times, and I did it, and it certainly works good in sports, and it works good in a lot of things in life, but not when you lose your son. It's so unnatural and foreign, and I can't even explain. There aren't even proper words to kind of explain the transformation and what happens to your body, your mind, your soul. I tell people, part of me died that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a part of me that I've lost and I'll never get it back. It's left this earth. There's part of my son that still resides in me, thankfully, but I'm a wholly different person than I was 5.5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can kind of paint the picture of what your life was like leading up to this, like who you were, so we can see really how this has changed you in so many ways, and probably will continue to change you in a myriad of ways.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I've spent my whole career in sports and entertainment. So I was a marketing executive agent. And at the time, I was working for the Jockey Club and handling the marketing for the sport of thoroughbred racing through a brand called America's Best Racing. And we lived in Connecticut. I commuted into the city every day. I traveled, obviously, for my job. Still very involved in family life as well, and my two boys, Jake and Liam, and their activities. It was, I would kind of describe it as very normal, right? I mean, beautiful wife, awesome mother, and two boys that were fun to father, and everything. We'd lived all over the country, every time zone, and we settled here in Connecticut to be closer to family. My wife's from Boston originally, and I'm from New York. So, yeah, it seemed like
It's kind of
everything.
that storybook life type.
Yeah, it seemed. Yeah, I don't know if storybooks the right word or phrase, because I don't know if such a thing exists, but it felt like we had gone through some struggles. We lived through Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and we were relocated from that. So we had our, like everybody, you have your ups and your downs. And I recall saying just a month before to my wife, that before the accident happened, how, like, we've weathered a lot. We've kind of, like, we've regained our footing. We kind of took some losses and we had rebounded, and it kind of just felt good to have, like, normal problems, like, oh, we forgot to put the garbage out this week, so it's going to back up. Just little things like that. It was nice to have those, and it was short lived.
Yeah, because you had all those other things moving you around, and now it felt settled. Maybe is that like a good term for life? How it felt at that
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. I mean, our boys were young, and when we moved here in 2010, so it was about getting them in school, putting some roots down. And so, yeah, we totally felt settled and doing the right thing.
The normal day to day type life. How old were your boys?
In 2010, Jake was 6 and Liam was 1.
Okay.
when we moved
So they
here.
were very young. So
Yeah.
this was really their beginning of, growing up and establishing roots, I guess, for themselves.
Hmm.
It felt like. Yeah, so carrying through that, this you said it like a month or so before you remember actually saying that to your wife, like it feels like we're in like a good steady place.
Yeah, I remember standing out on the driveway in the summer and just we were looking at I don't know what we were doing and maybe getting out of the car and I just kind of stopped and turned around and looked at the house, the outside. We spent a lot of time gardening and making our yard look nice, and so it was just taking it all in. And it was kind of in that moment there was a recognition of where we were, where we had gotten to, and because kind of this exhale of like, okay, things are good.
Yeah. It and looking back on it too, you're probably like, yeah, things were good.
Yeah.
So what unfolded as the month kind of moved forward?
So Jake had just started dating a girl that was a grade older than him. He was a rising junior, so she was a senior. They'd only been dating 4 or 5 weeks. We had just returned from a family vacation late July, right at the beginning of August, and she invited Jake to go away for the weekend to Block Island, which is a tiny island off the coast of Rhode Island. It's about 2 hours from our home. And initially we said no, just didn't, something about it didn't, it was just like, nah, it's not right. And not the right time. You just kind of mad, all this stuff. And 2 days later, we had like a microburst storm come through our town and the next town over, and it took out trees and power lines, and so we lost power. And it was August, dog days of summer, it was hot, so got the generator going, and it was in that time that my wife and I kind of rethought it. And he was persistent. Jake always didn't give up the argument easy, and
A teenager too.
exactly, he was 16 years old. He'd just gotten his driver's permit. He was scheduled to get his license soon, and he was persuasive. And I think it just was like, hey, we don't have power, we're running on a generator, it's just a weekend. So we decided to let him go. He left on Friday. The day, it's funny because I say funny, but Thursday night I took Jake and his girlfriend to get gas so that they could run their generator to get a tree removed so that they could leave on time. It was blocking their driveway. A tree had fallen. And I knew the mom from riding the train. We both commuted. We both were on the same morning train and happened to stand near each other at the platform. And I met her years ago. I think it was in 2012-ish when I don't know how we got on it, but we were making conversation and she revealed to me that she had lost her husband to cancer. And my brother had lost his wife to cancer. And so we kind of just shared that and had that moment. And then, so when Jake came home and told me like, hey, this is who I'm dating, her mom, I was like, oh, okay. And I think that gave us like a false sense of security. My wife had never really met her. Their conversations about this trip were all via text with everything that was going on with everybody. And so Jake left on Friday morning. It was August 7th. And I'll never forget it because I woke him up that morning and it was just different. Something about the whole thing was different, Matt. We actually all were up and awake at 7:30 in the morning on our mudroom porch with Jake and his luggage, as saying goodbye to him. And it's so weird because he literally looked at us as his girlfriend pulled in the driveway. And he goes, and we all hugged him. And then he just looked at us and said, "You're acting like you'll never see me again." Mm. Then he turned and walked down the driveway and flashed his signature peace sign. And they pulled out and drove away. And my wife started crying. And I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I feel like he just got married and he went away." Mm. And she wasn't sure if she was going to see him again. It was just a weird feeling. And then obviously with what happened, looking back on it now, it's very eerie that he would say that. And 2 days later, on Sunday, August 9th, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my well, my wife's phone rang. Her name is Kelly, and it was the mother calling to say that there had been an accident. She didn't have any details. Jake was injured. That was the only thing she had. She wasn't at the scene, so she was on her way there, and my wife frantically hung up, packed an overnight bag. I grabbed Liam, and we hopped in our car and began to speed towards Rhode Island. As I mentioned, about a 2-hour drive. It was on I-95. We were 12 minutes into the drive when Kelly's phone rang again, and she answered it. It was connected to the speaker system, so it came right through. Liam was kind of leaning forward. Jake's little brother, he's 11 at the time. He was leaning forward between the two seats into the center console, and it was a doctor who introduced himself from Rhode Island. And then he paused, and then he said, I'm sorry, but I just pronounced your son dead. And everything pretty much went black. I was flying down the highway, so I just remember knowing, I don't know how, but I knew I had to get off the highway. I had no business driving, and I worked my over to the way to the right-hand lane and exited the first exit I could get off at. And it was a Sunday, and we pulled off the exit, and straight ahead was an empty bank lot. And so I ran right through the light and came to a screeching stop in the bank parking lot, and we opened the doors and just began screaming to the sky and running in circles until we all kind of collided and fell to the ground, just bawling our eyes out and total disbelief, shock. And the doctor was still on the phone. My wife was clutching the phone in one hand. I do remember that. And he held on as we just kind of let out our grief. And it was an out-of-body experience. It felt like the whole world had stopped, yet when you turned and looked, people were pulling into the Burger King next door looking at us, and cars were coming and going, and it felt like we were just standing still, and everything was moving around us, and we were frozen in the most horrific nightmare you can be frozen in.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that, and also just thinking of how you find out via a phone call. It's like the words of some person you've never met tells you this horrible news. I can imagine how I would probably think or be in disbelief, I guess, like you mentioned. Were there moments of like, oh, this is wrong, like in denial, I guess? Did you have moments of denial, or did you?
Yeah. I mean, denial lasted more than a moment. It lasted for months. You know, there's a part of your brain that simply doesn't want to accept that your son is forever gone. I'm aware that he is intellectually, but accepting that is a totally different thing. And I'm not sure my brain fully accepts it to this day. You know, I know I won't accept it, right? It happened and he's gone. And we later learned that later that evening, we learned the details of the accident. Jake was a passenger in the vehicle. It was operated recklessly, speeding, went off the road, crashed, hit a telephone pole. Jake was killed. Another boy was airlifted off the island. He ended up being fine after a couple of days in the hospital, and he had some broken bones and bruises. And then the driver was arrested and charged with reckless driving and driving under the influence, and the driver was Jake's teenage girlfriend. So truly a nightmare. And it was like your life just blew up in that moment.
Right. This is not meant to sound insensitive. In that moment, in that parking lot, where you guys are trying to find a sense of like where you are, who you are, like all, you know, bringing yourself back to center if you can, as close as possible. What do you do next? Like, is that, because part of me do we keep going? Because now we're going to find out for real, right? We're going to the hospital to like see and witness and understand that. Do you back off and we go home and I don't even know what you do at that moment. What did you guys do?
We ended up getting in our car, and I can't remember if the doctor said something to Kelly or not. Like there was that there was a process and Jake would eventually be taken back to the mainland and then have to be examined by the medical examiner of the state of Rhode Island in Providence. I can't honestly remember. My gut told me that he was dead. There was nothing we could do. I needed to get my family home. And my wife was hysterical. My son, he's an 11-year-old boy. You can relate. He was trying to, impossible to process. We were messed up. And so we got home. I remember I called my mom first and told her to sit down and told her the news. And then I called some really good friends and told them that knew Jake really well. And their son was a best friend. And we told them and said, we need you to come on over. And then, the era that we live in with social media and whatnot, the people knew and then just started pouring over to our home. And it's like the longest day of my life. And I remember at some point, I don't know, late afternoon, I had the wherewithal to call a funeral parlor here in town. When we first moved here, I lived next door to a gentleman that owned a funeral parlor. And I called him and it was a godsend. He made sure that Jake's body got home and helped work through all those arrangements. And it was, the bizarrest phone call I've ever had in my life. Can't even believe I'm saying these words like, can you get my son home? Can you get his body home? And I just knew I had to do certain things, even in that moment, as much as I was lost, hurting.
Part of me thinks, I don't know if facing something like that as an adult, although I have lost someone close as an adult, but it was different than my first experience of losing like someone suddenly in an accident and it wasn't a child. Having all those people around can, on one hand, seem very comforting and helpful, but also I could see a side where it would be really hard to feel like you had to be something other than how you were feeling. Did you experience any of that?
I was still having such an out-of-body experience. I was aware that people were here, and I was glad because my wife was hysterical, and there wasn't anything that anyone could do, but it was nice to have her girlfriends around to sit with her. It was hard for me to see her in such profound pain, and so I instinctively moved outside and was, like I said, was on the phone, making arrangements, talking to other family. And when the word to get out, my phone was ringing a lot. And I would come back in and check on her. And I just remember people coming and going. It was just a flow. And I think in some ways it helped because it just made time pass. And then all of a sudden, I do remember that all of a sudden the house just became empty. It was dark. And we went upstairs. I think we went upstairs. There was 2 people left in the house, and they said they were going to clean up and let themselves out. And we went upstairs, the 3 of us, and just lie down. And I just remember laying there thinking, how can I sleep? I'm never going to be able to sleep. And I knew that. And I just tried to get Kelly asleep and Liam. He was certainly scared. I'll never forget. He asked in that moment, he said, what happens if something happens to you guys? And that really hit hard. Didn't really have an answer for him. Just tried to make him, it's not going to happen, Liam. But he just saw that what's not going to happen already happened. And so I understood his not trusting the world anymore because none of us did. It's one of the big changes. You just don't trust anything anymore because the worst has happened. And so it's broken that glass bubble or whatever you want to call it of protection, or it's the illusion of control. I think we have all this control and we really don't until we find out. And I didn't sleep for weeks, didn't eat.
Did you feel like you had to be the person to hold things together? Did you put that responsibility on yourself?
I did. Somebody had to, and it kind of goes with being the dad. And I did as best as I could, but I also was distraught. I was crying openly. And I know it was hard for people to see and when they came over, but it's who we are. And we were messed up for a long time and still are to a degree. Like I said, there's elements of this that you just can't shake and that you have to like plan, build around, protect. Your heart's just destroyed. It really felt like someone reached into my chest, Matt,
Yeah.
and just ripped out my beating heart.
I can imagine. And I would imagine, well, I don't want to put this on you, but were there there must have been feelings of anger towards other individuals that were part of this, which then further complicates grief, I think, in my opinion. It muddies you trying to heal yourself because that's also there. Did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, like I said, I first blamed myself for not protecting Jake, even though I was stayed away. And the mother had texted Kelly her last words prior to the kids leaving were, "I'll be watching the kids, so nothing to worry about," until there was something to worry about. And I felt, like I said, I blamed myself for a good month. But I also had rage that the mom didn't watch the children like she had promised us she would. She put her daughter, she actually, at one point, they left the house. First of all, there's no reason to be in a car. They're on an island and where they could walk to everything. And she put a total of 6 teenage boys, including her son, into that car with her daughter driving and sent them on their way so that she could go across the street and have some beach time. It's hard to get your head around that. And thankfully, the young lady dropped off her brother and his friend at a surf shop, paddleboard shop, before the accident happened. It happened a mile down the road, minutes later. And you just shouldn't have that many kids in a car. And it's against the law. And the mother's kind of, I guess, selfishness and putting her needs and priorities above safety is just something that you can't wrap your head around, and you can't, never understand. And there's certainly rage against the circumstances that unfolded. And it took me a long time, and it was well over a year and change. And I finally reached a point where I realized that for me to move forward and walk on in this, I needed to forgive, not just myself, but others. And I did a lot
That's a
of
really hard decision.
Yeah, I did a lot of reading. It's counter to what they say you're capable of when you suffer traumatic, acute grief. But for some reason, that was the one salve that helped me. I just started consuming books on grief and loss and life and spirituality, and just trying to, you're searching for answers because our brains are hardwired to seek them out. And
solutions,
yeah, but in this case, there was never going to be an answer. And yet I kept reading, and I came across this one line from a theologian who said that forgiveness is releasing a prisoner only to discover that you were the prisoner. And that really resonated. And that's when I realized, like, I can still hold people accountable. I can still have rage, but I can also have forgiveness. And so forgiving allowed me to walk on and to like put my focus and energy on other things, more positive.
Yeah. And all the while you're finding this journey for yourself, and you're also witnessing the journey of your wife and Liam. Were you able to show up for them? Did they find their own paths? Like how did that look like? Because sometimes we think it's all about us. Not saying that you felt this way, but sometimes it just feels it's so heavy that we can barely move through it. How do you navigate that with the people around you also grieving in their own ways?
Yeah, I mean, my focus was our collective survival. I had lost one child. I wasn't going to lose anybody else. I think probably I was not necessarily dealing with everything that I needed to be dealing with, because you only have so much capacity. And my wife didn't want to live. My son didn't want to live. And so I had to like put everything into like getting through one day, 1 hour, one day onto the next. It was a struggle for 2 years. Second year was harder than the first. And that later found out that's often the case. And it seems, after you get a little distance from it, you realize that, well, the shock wore off and you don't have that buffer anymore. And the reality is right there. But as I said earlier, the fact that it just never goes away. And, now our lives are, there's a calendar like there was before, but instead of being like happy moments, holidays and birthdays and anniversaries, it's just these landmines, and they come at the same time every year, and you have to almost steel yourself in advance, and you're aware that they're coming, and you don't look forward to them, obviously, like you used to look forward to these events, and they're hard. Holidays are particularly tough from Thanksgiving on. This, like I said, was my 5th year, and I had a horrible holiday season, very depressing, and it's, and I was in a funk, and I had to get myself out of it, and I did, and some of it is just surviving that season.
Did you guys rely on any particular tools to help you, whether that's therapy? You said reading, writing, those kind of things helped you.
Therapy was huge. My wife found a therapist for us within 3 weeks, and that was massive. And we had a great grief therapist who's done this for 40 years. He's based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and just a remarkable man who saved our lives. And he's one of my best friends, and still in touch. I had an emergency session with him over the holidays right before Christmas, because I was in a dark place again. And my wife still sees him a little bit more irregular now, but he was truly a lifesaver. And I don't think we would have made it without that. I mean, we were meeting with him twice a week for 2-3 years, and then it turned into one time a week. We got Liam help. We all needed it, and we needed it as much as we could. We had other bereaved parents reach out and make connections and offer their ear, their insights. Though there's no elixir. So it's like, well,
grasping for straws.
Yeah, people are well-meaning, and we had we had a food train for a year and 3 months. I had a guy mow my lawn for 4 months. People came over and walked our dogs in the days and weeks initially following it. We had tremendous support from friends and family, and forever grateful for it. But it's a process, and it continues to this day. And there's, like I said, my wife and I have to every day think about things, talk about it, plan it out so that we're protective of our hearts, because they're pretty broken. And what has been able to heal, if there's such a thing, or put back together, it's very tender. So you don't want to get hurt again on any level, certainly not like that.
Yeah, earlier on in this conversation, you mentioned I don't know if it was guilt or shame that sometimes can come when we have a good day after. Do you allow yourself to have those good days now?
Oh, I do now, yeah. But in those, I'll never forget, I forget when it was, but we went out to dinner for the first time after losing Jake, and we were tucked in a corner with some friends, dark corner, and it even felt weird just being out. And somebody said something that was funny, and I laughed for the first time in months. And I caught myself, and I just started to look around a little bit to my left and right. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to be laughing. And yet I should be laughing. I should find humor in things again. I needed to get back into life. And humor is a great way to cope with grief. So, yeah, but it felt weird. And I initially felt like some shame around it, like I shouldn't be doing this. And then I realized that's stupid. But my wife didn't grocery shop for like a year. She didn't leave the house a lot. And I understood. I didn't leave it a lot, and I still don't now. So much had changed. It was COVID, and then behaviors changed post-COVID, and now our capacities are shrunk. Mm-hmm. I left my job. Yeah, it's safer at home. I left my job in 24, opened my own small agency, and just tried to take again, control, right? The few things that I could control, I tried to be able to be in control of those. I wanted to be around my son more and not miss any moments, because now everything was incredibly, it was already precious, but now it was took on a whole nother level of preciousness. So yeah, I mean, who I was and who I am, two different beings, if you
Yeah.
will.
You sound really in touch with yourself as far as self-awareness, self like emotions and understanding those, and not putting any kind of shame on any particular emotion. Were you always this way before? Were you pretty in touch with your emotions before this?
I
Or did
thought
this open it up?
I thought I was, but then this really, it opens you up in a way that you can't even begin to explain. You know,
Yeah. The reason I ask that is I think about my father when my mom died, and they weren't married, but obviously he loved her still, there was that come along with it. But I almost think it was the time period of late 80s where it seemed to me that he just had to push that down and act like everything was okay. And so I don't think he had the capacity that you're exhibiting here, you and your wife, like just really leaning into the brokenness and finding, how do we navigate this moving forward as best as we can, knowing full well that we're not going to put ourselves back into the old versions of ourselves. But I think of my dad, I think he was 37 at the time. And nope, he was not. I don't know. He was like 30, 34 maybe. And just the capacity was so different. Like he didn't put me in therapy. He didn't put himself in therapy. His mom didn't put herself in, like there was none of that work that it seems like you guys did. And that's where a lot of my curiosity comes from, is that, like, on one hand, tragic, would not wish this on anyone. On the other hand, the ability for you guys to lean into the support that you needed, not to try to just show up back in the world like quote unquote everyone expected you to do, is so commendable, and such a great example, if anyone has to go through something similar, of what we should do as humans to take care of ourselves. So I don't know, I'm saying all this and it sounds like a compliment, but it's just I appreciate that you guys were able to do that and move through the world in this way and make examples for other people of what real grief and that journey can look like.
yeah, I mean, you touch on it. There's this stigma around grief, sadly, and especially for men. And I we were just who we were and who we are, and so we weren't going to make it without help. And I can't even imagine trying to without this, because it's just impossible.
Yeah. And it
If
still is, and it
yeah,
always will be.
yeah, totally.
Do you find that the memories and stuff, for me, a lot of the memories early on were like of the loss, of the accident, the things that I knew. And now, well, it's been so long now and I don't really remember her, but when I do think back, it's just the good parts. Do you have, how did your memories of Jake, do they change? Are they different now than they were 5 years ago?
Yes and no. When I go to bed, I'm still haunted by, you know, the day, and then the day that I saw his body 4 days later. That typically comes back at nighttime for some reason.
Because your body's
Uh,
tired, your mind's tired.
yeah, and I don't know, but I do I'm able to have memories of him now that make me smile, bring back a little joy. But my wife isn't. My wife cannot really, she doesn't want to look at pictures of him because it just reminds her that her son's dead. She doesn't want to see videos because it reminds her, she goes right to he's dead, but he's dead. And in fact, we were on a Compassionate Friends meeting the other day. And again, we're 5.5 years out, and my wife just opened up and shared with the group exactly what she was feeling and how she was feeling. And if you were on that call, that Zoom and you didn't know that she was 5.5 years out, you probably would have guessed that she was 2 weeks out. So, and that's the thing. Grief is an individual journey. Liam, Kelly, and I all experienced the same exact tragic event, but how we dealt with it and how we continue to deal with it is completely different. Men and women cope differently and heal and grieve differently. So that was like a whole layer on top of an already tough layer. And that's the thing with grief that people don't necessarily always get, is that they just focus on, well, you lost someone and we're sorry. Well, you didn't just lose someone, you lost a future with that person. So every single moment that you're going to go celebrate, we're going to hurt. And all the things that you're going to get to see, we're not going to get to see. Like, I'm not going to see Jake, go to college. I'm not going to see him get married, get his first job, have kids, become a father. All these things, take him to games, like we used to go to. And so you lose all those future events. So there's a mourning within the mourning, if you will. And I'm not trying to sound like woe is me, because I'm not that. I'm just saying how it is, Yeah, it's hard. I wouldn't wish this upon anybody.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to celebrate those moments with Liam as he's hitting those milestones?
I try to, even from day one, we tried to put the best face we could on honoring that we're still parents and Liam's deserving of a good life. And so we do, utilize what little energy we have. We put it into making sure that it's positive for Liam. Yeah. He's getting the best experience he can in life and given equal opportunities to grow and evolve and become whoever he's going to become. But it's a challenge for sure.
I am curious about the decision to start the scholarship, to start writing, to start sharing your story more broadly. Like what brought you to those points to want to get more public, I guess, about it?
Well, the first scholarship started in literally 2 or 3 days after Jake died. We were being inundated with flowers. We didn't need any more flowers. Literally, our house was covered in them. And my wife said Jake would want to help others. And that's how he lived his life. He was mature for his age and was a very compassionate, empathetic soul who did care about others and always had an innate way of lifting up others. Anybody he was around, Jake was always smiling, and he just had this way. I don't know how to, like, if he walked into a room, he's the type of kid who immediately lit it up. You knew Jake was there because, one, he had a big head of curly blonde hair. We called it the blonde afro. And so he visually was a good looking kid, but then he had this energy that was palpable. So you'd either see him or you'd feel his energy. And he had been on a mission trip summer before to in 2019 with his church youth group to Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and where they help young children from one of the poorest areas on the reservation learn life skills. They help them with reading and writing and arithmetic and just other life things, and play with them, right? And just be real and kind of give them a break from their tough day-to-day existence. And Jake came home from that experience very moved and equally upset with the inequalities he witnessed. And when he got off the bus, I picked him up at like 3 a.m. and first thing he said to me wasn't like, "Hi, Dad," or "So good to be home." The first thing he said was, "We got to help these kids." And so Kelly wisely said, "Let's create a scholarship to help the children there." And so we did. And that was the first scholarship. And then months later, we created the second one. Jake's goal was to go to the University of South Carolina and follow in my footsteps. And he had just taken his first PSAT or practice SAT, literally a month before. Got like a 1340. He was locked in on where he wanted to go, what he wanted to do. And so I felt a responsibility as his father to make sure he got there. And a mutual friend, somehow let the new head football coach at South Carolina, Shane Beamer, know of our circumstances. And 2 days before that first Christmas, we got my phone rang, and I was out on a walk. I had left my phone at home, which I usually never did, and I just needed a break. It was a pretty joyless time in our house. And when I got home, I saw the phone message, the number, and I thought it was an 843 prefix, which is like the lower Charleston, South Carolina area, low country. And I thought it was one of my friends from college calling to kind of cheer me up or whatever. And I listened to the message, and it wasn't. It was Shane Beamer, who had been on the job for 2 weeks, and he was calling to talk to us, and gave us his phone number, said call back. He was really wanted to check in on Liam, and so I called him back. He was on the phone interviewing another coach. He was, again, just building his own program, and we ended up connecting a few hours later. And he reminded me of Jake. He was very concerned about Liam and looking after him. And I got off the phone from that experience, and I looked at Kelly and I said, I think I know how I'm going to get Jake to South Carolina. And so I let the holidays pass and into the new year, and I reached back out to Shane and I said, I have an idea, create a walk-on scholarship. And Shane was a walk-on football player himself at Virginia Tech. So he totally embraced the idea right away. And we went out and we raised money, and the scholarship's endowed now. So it'll live forever. And that was the second scholarship. And then just this past summer, we created the third. And they're all called the Jake Panus Walk-On Scholarship. And the third one's here in Connecticut with the Boys and Girls Club. Jake was very active in and helping kids from Bridgeport, an inner city program where they're underserved, much like the children in South Dakota, neglected to a degree and underserved, underprivileged, and not given access like we are. And that's exactly what Jake would want to be doing. And same with the football players at South Carolina. These are gritty, tough kids who often get overlooked and don't get the chances that they deserve. They come from a smaller school, so they just, for whatever reason, but they also have great leadership. And that's what the Scholarship Down There awards. It's kids who are on and off the field, good people, care about their community and are leaders. So through 5 years, we've awarded 8 scholarships, and we'll be doing that every year.
That's great.
Forever.
And you've created a legacy for Jake to last through these other children or kids or adults or whatever age they may be.
And it's funny you bring that up because when we started this, it was all about just honoring Jake for us, right? And in doing this and I'm in touch with all the kids that receive the scholarship. I stay in touch with them. My wife jokingly says I'm fathering more children, but each one of them is carrying a part of Jake with them in their life. But what I didn't realize when we created it was all these other things that it was going to provide. So for a bereaved parent to hear my son's name said by others is important. And if we didn't create these, I'm not sure people would be talking about Jake or saying his name aloud or writing about him. And so that's been really positive for me in my healing. And then it also led to me speaking, which is me now carrying on Jake's legacy of helping others and lifting up other people. I'm doing that because it's the one thing that makes me feel better about living and being here is helping other people. And I realize too, that's exactly why we're here. We're here to love and lift each other up. It's kind of that simple, but we complicate it.
And a byproduct of that is now more people know who Jake is, and you get to share who he was with you. And now, more people have his story in their minds. So I think you found a way to make a little bit of beauty from something so tragic that affects way more than just you, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely is very fulfilling when you see the gratitude from the recipients and just even other people that hear the story, and maybe it helps them get through their own tough time. Because grief isn't just when we lose someone we love. It comes in, there's a financial crisis. You go through a separation or divorce. You lose your job. You get a bad health diagnosis. Sadly, this world is filled with grief. And obviously I became much more attuned to it when I lost Jake. And I think I don't even know the right word, but one of the things that emerged from this was that your awareness and sensitivity to the level of grief that exists. And so, again, I recognize there's a lot of men that don't know how to deal with it, or because we just haven't been taught. And there's just a lot of people that when they hear grief, or experience it. They run for the hills, try to sweep it under the rug. And so I saw an opportunity to help people that way as well. Like, okay, I'll put my heart right out there, if you will, and my story, because if it helps one person in that audience, then I win
Yeah,
in the
if they
game
feel
of
less
life.
alone, if
Yeah.
they feel validated in how they felt. Sometimes we are like, oh, I shouldn't be, like you said, your example of sitting in the corner of that restaurant and feeling like I shouldn't laugh. And it's like, well, you're also a human in this experience, and you're going to go through all the emotions, and there's no one right way to grieve, and nor should there be, because the three of you said, all experience the same trauma, if you will, but are on wildly different journeys through that grief and healing.
Yeah. And when things happen to us as humans, we often feel alone in our circumstances and isolated. And then you realize you're not, that there's a lot of other people out there dealing with same or similar or worse. I remember I needed an emergency therapy session a year ago or so with my therapist, and he was kind enough to do it early on a Sunday morning. And when we finished the session, he said, "Okay, I got to go now. My next client is in Ukraine." And I thought immediately right there, my whole perspective changed, because I'm like, no matter what I was going through or feeling and dealing with, someone on his next call was going to be even worse. And it gave instant perspective to, I always say things are never as bad as they seem or never as good as they seem. And it really just shined a light on, like, well, and this is a big thing I think for anyone dealing with grief, is finding gratitude, because you have to find gratitude in things, and it allows you to have perspective. And it's tough at first. I'll admit that it's not easy when you go through something like this to look around and be happy about anything. But over time and with time, you slowly can begin to find little things to find joy again and to smile at and be grateful for. And once you can do that, I think you're on the way to, and all these answers are within us. They're not external. But once a person can do that, they're on the way back.
Yeah. Curious if this version of you 5 years out could walk up to the Stephen that had just jumped out of the car with your wife and your son, and you could stop him and say anything to him, is there anything you would want to tell him?
There are no magic words. What I am capable of doing now is showing up, but we're all capable of doing that. You can fake a lot of things in this life, Matt, but you can't fake showing up, and that's what people need. So if anybody like that's listening knows somebody that's going through a hard time, a loss of a person or a job or health or anything, show up for them. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but just show up. Hug them. You don't have to say the right words. Sit with them. Just be there. And that's what they need. They just need to know that they're not alone and that you care. And they also know, like, hey, there's nothing you can say that's going to make me feel better, but just being there makes them feel better. Yeah.
Yep. No, I think it's so true, just to know that they're not alone in that, and that we're here. However that looks, however you need, we are here for you. So yeah, well, thank you for sharing your story in this way. If people want to like check out like what you're doing, your book, like get in your circle, or maybe they just want to tell you part of their story because something you said resonated deeply with them, like what's the best way to find you, get in your space?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's just my name, Stephen with a PH, and then the last name is Panus, PANUS.com. They can contact me through that, and they can read about the scholarships and the speaking and Jake and his story. And the book's available. The book is entitled Walk On, and it's available via Amazon and all the other booksellers out there. And all the proceeds from the book sales go to the scholarships. Your support helps support other young children who have college dreams, just like Jake.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. We will, or I will, include the links to all of those things in the show notes. So if anyone's listening wants to just jump easily there, just check out the show notes, click the link, you'll get to the spaces that are that Stephen just mentioned. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story and being open in this way, and being a part of my healing journey, because every conversation that I have with people is like, it heals some little part of me that I didn't know needed it. So thank you for today.
Thanks for having me and giving me the platform to share. And thanks for what you do, because you're helping a lot of people, Matt.
I appreciate that. I will accept that. I think it's something you know now as well, that being able to hold the space or help other people feel less alone is something that is so heartwarming and healing. So I appreciate that and accept that. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. So thanks again, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Life Shift Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift Journal. Links are there, so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.